Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're playing more of the Patience is a Virtue seasonal event, which is an alternate game mode in which at the start of our turn, all the cards in our hand will get transformed into a random card that costs one more provision. Now you might think that means that your starting deck does not matter, but that is not the case. So let's go take a look at the deck. So today we'll be playing a Scoia'Tael Deadeye ambush deck that focuses on playing Saskia Commander, which can summon a bunch of bronze units out from our deck where they will not get transformed by this event. So the key is to either find a tutor to play her, or if we're on blue coin, use Curse Scroll to get her. Other than that, since we can use our leader ability to spawn in 3 elves, as long as we get a couple more elves somewhere out of the random cards that end up in our hand, we should be able to get Aelirenn summoned out from our deck for additional value as well. Other than that, it's pretty much just a whole bunch of bronze Scoia'Tael units, so not a whole lot to talk about there. Just lots of stuff for Saskia to summon. Theoretically, there are enough traps in our deck to trigger Iorveth's Gambit. However, of course, you still need to have some of those traps remaining in your deck for that to work, so still not guaranteed if you do happen to get Iorveth's Gambit randomly showing up in your hand. So that's really all there is to it. Just find a way to get Saskia Commander, I think ideally in the melee row. And if you can get additional elves on the board combined with your leader ability to summon in Aelirenn, then that is perfect. We also have Devotion, and we don't have any duplicate cards, which means that both Shoop's Day Off and Redea will both work. So let's go see it in action. Alright, so going up against Nilfgaard here. And we'll go first. Okay, so top priority is to make sure that we don't have Saskia Commander in our hand, and we don't, so that's good. Next, we would like to avoid having Aelirenn in our hand, and we don't have her, that's also good. Then Vernossiel, and to a lesser extent Call the Force, we might want to try to get rid of them. Then if we're being extremely picky, Oakcritters is our only treant that Saskia Commander can summon, so we'll try to get rid of that. So now, let's leave it at this. And so we can't use Curse Scroll on our first turn to get Saskia Commander because our hand is full. So in that case, on our first turn, let's make sure that we play a card that wouldn't prevent Saskia from taking something out from our deck. For example, playing Sorceress of Dol Blathanna might prevent us from getting a Sorceress of Dol Blathanna out from our deck with Saskia Commander. So let's avoid playing that, and perhaps begin with an Incinerating Trap instead. They'll go Saber-Tooth Tiger, which is interesting, because that is also a really strong first-turn play. Unfortunately, they can switch it back into artifact form, which means it will just shrug off that damage we dealt. Fortunately for us, Saskia is a great way to work around the Saber-Tooth Tiger's damage. So let's use Curse Scroll now, and we could either get Saskia directly, or use Call the Forest. And we'll put an Aristocrat back in our deck, that might be useful later on. Use Call the Forest to get Saskia, and give her a little bit of a boost, just in case. And because she immediately summons a card from our deck, that means we have 2 cards in this melee row, so no Saber-Tooth Tiger dealing damage to us this time round. And they will destroy our dwarf. And Saskia is actually a bit of an anti-Harmony synergy, because we're going to be summoning all those cards from our deck, not playing them, so they will not proc Harmony, and playing a Dryad means we won't summon a Dryad out from our deck. So let's not use Cirsa. Instead, let's just use one of these guys for a Point Slam. I guess we'll do Letho. Although I definitely should have played him in the melee row to avoid the Saber-Tooth Tiger damage. Yes, Saskia will start summoning more things in here, and to a certain extent, that may mean that this melee row could get a little crowded, but not enough so for that to be a major concern, at least not yet at this stage. So we could play a Dodric of our own here to give us a little bit more control over what cards we have in our hand, or an Thrall for damage. Valibor unfortunately doesn't have great targets, so let's try Dodric. Now Saskia does get a Sorceress of Dol Blathanna out from our deck, as we were saying before. Deliberately did not play her for that very reason, when we had the chance to do so on turn 1. And then it's Bribery, which turns into a Cat Witcher. We just really don't want that to hit the Sorceress. Fortunately, it doesn't. Because if it did, then she wouldn't be able to use her ability at all. And technically, Ivar and Great Oak are worth the most points here. However, I do like how the Enraged Ifrit has just enough damage to get rid of this Cat Witcher altogether, shutting that down. So, first, let's just see what we get here. Because it is not enough damage with Waylay for us to get rid of that Cat Witcher. So let's go Tempering. And let's use the Ifrit to get rid of the Cat Witcher. And I did like our hand a lot, though, so that's why I didn't use Dodric. Okay, then it's Quacks. They go melee or range. Range will unleash our weakest cards. And we already had a human on the board, so that's not a big deal. That's not going to weaken Saskia Commander. Okay, and we could go with the other Saskia. As I think I was saying before, Harmony does not work very well with Saskia Commander, but this may still be strong enough to justify it. Alternatively, Royce is pretty nice at this stage as well. I think we might want to go that route. And let's get rid of our Miner, so that we can get rid of that Ardfiend Heavy Cavalry, since Assimilate is a little bit nasty in this event. Let's deliberately not use the Abandoned Girl yet, because we've not yet summoned a Dryad onto the board. And once again, just haven't really needed Dodric yet. So they'll pass, giving us the round 1 win. And we'll thin out an Oakcritters as well. Okay, now that we've played Saskia Commander, we're not as concerned about accidentally getting specific cards into our hand, so let's just get rid of some of our higher provision cost cards like Regis and like Yorvit's Gambit. And we did play one more card than our opponent in round 1, so we would probably like to dry pass here. They'll go with Simlas. And Attorney Joust. And of course, that's all they need to win round 2. Okay, and we do draw into Aelirenn here, and that is probably one of the only cards at this stage that we want to make sure stays in our deck. So we'll swap her out. And then, other than that, let's get rid of some of our other higher provision cost cards, like either Sunset Wanderers or the Brutes, since those are going to turn into scenarios pretty soon. And nope, speaking of scenarios, start with Masquerade Ball. And usually, that would mean that they've bricked their hand at least a little bit. However, specifically, with Nilfgaard Tactical Decision, it may mean that if they have a bunch of aristocrats in their deck, they might be able to draw into one and trigger a Masquerade Ball, or 2, or 3, or however many they have on the board when they do that. However, if we go with Lydia in the range row, we can then use Tourney Joust to get rid of that Thirsty Dame. Then they'll go Damien, which is, of course, very strong. And unfortunately, no immediate ways to shut down Damien. So we may just go with Vivian here. Power up Lydia. Then it is another Masquerade Ball. It does make me suspicious that they may be doing this on purpose. Again, because their leader ability does give them a better chance of actually triggering those Masquerade Balls if they've built their deck around that. And with Damien, they can give that a couple of attempts. So that might mean having a card with immunity could be very helpful, since they'd like to target something with all those poisons. Yeah, this is looking a whole lot like this is not a coincidence. And it's still early enough in the round that Pavko could make some sense. However, Triss is also quite tempting, especially because she's an 11, so she is going to turn into some borderline unplayable cards in the not-so-distant future. So in the interest of managing the provision cost of our cards, let's go with her. And let's use Experimental Remedy to get an Assimilate unit, since that'll get boosted every turn. Okay, then it's our Death for some weather damage. And I think we go Dandelion here. Dwarven's Gambit is actually not a bad option, because we do have enough traps in our starting deck for this to work. I was thinking that we were going to go with Naglfar, but if at best Naglfar was going to give us Dwarven's Gambit, then might as well just guarantee that we get it here. Oh, it doesn't work if the cards have transformed. I see. And it's Ciri Dash, which will have enough time to give them card draw unless we do something about it. Which might mean that we respond with the Ciri Dash of our own. However, Old Spirit Tip is also pretty tempting. But I think let's take the card draw. Okay, and then it's Simlas. This time for battle preparation. On Ciri. And Dennis is not bad here, because we do have a lot of cards in the range row. That would be a pretty sizable boost. Radea does also work. We do not have any duplicates in our deck. And I think I will go this route, because if we play her in our melee row, spawn in our faction stratagem, which will eventually give us more elves, and then combine that with our leader ability, we should get enough elves on the board to summon Aelirenn out from our deck. Then it's Feign Death, and that is actually a scenario that we wouldn't mind playing ourselves. And they get a random Sunset Wanderers out from their hand. And I'm afraid no great options for us here. The Brute will turn into, in all likelihood, a scenario on our next turn. If it's Feign Death, that's not the end of the world. Anything else would be pretty bad for us. So I think in the interest of trying to avoid taking that risk, let's go with the Brute. And then they're using a leader ability charge here. Remember, they can get another one with Damien. So the question becomes, is this going to be an aristocrat? Because they may have deliberately loaded up their deck with a bunch of aristocrats for that very purpose. Yep. That does appear to be the case, so bring on a whole bunch of poisons. They are going to start to run low on board space, though. Going after Ciri just as she was about to give us the card draw, unfortunately. And they still get theirs. Now, Carlo Varese is pretty atrocious with only 2 cards left in our hand. However, Drowner is pretty solid if we use that to move Damien into the range row where he can no longer use his ability. So I say we go for that. Since they were going to be relying on that to trigger the next round of all these Masquerade balls, even if they weren't going to have enough space for them. Okay, so then it's Junior. So they'll use to deal some damage, but they are now completely full. And we get Damien, which is an amazing card. It is just, unfortunately, too little too late, since he's not going to have enough time to use his order ability. Obviously, we'll play him. And then we'll use our stratagem here. Get some more elves out. And then if we combine that with our leader ability, should be just enough elves to summon Aelirenn. Which, in case they do somehow get a special card here that can boost them or deal damage to us, hopefully is just enough to hold on for the win. They can still use Junior, though. But they can't play that last card, so that means we'll take the win. Alright, so going up against Nilfgaard here. And they'll go first. Okay, so our top priority is to make sure that we don't have Saskia Commander in our hand, and we don't, so that's nice. Second priority is make sure that we don't have Aelirenn in our hand, and we don't have her either. That's also nice. Third priority would be to make sure that we don't have Vernossiel in our hand, so let's get rid of her. And since we didn't get any of those other cards that we want to avoid having in our hand, we should be fine here. Okay, they're going to start with Sapper. And get Knickers out. And interestingly, Cat Witcher is probably the best of all these cards, but we'd actually like not to play it in case we do have a way to get Saskia Commander out later, because this would be a card that we'd otherwise be able to summon out from our deck. So instead, let's go with the Kirak Frigate. Okay, then they'll play Kirak Frigate. And either we could lock their frigate with Margarita, or we could take a little bit of chance with Prince Willem and hope that we get Saskia Commander out here. Other potential cards we might get would be Aelirenn. That would be unfortunate. Vernossiel would also be great, or our traps are not bad. Obviously, Call the Force would work as well. I think we give it a shot. And it is Call the Force, which means, yes, we can get Saskia Commander out here. So that's perfect. And technically playing Saskia in the melee row is usually best because we do have some cards that she can summon that are row locked to the melee row. However, well, with us having the Kirak Frigate in this row as well, that's also going to spawn in a bunch of units. That's probably not ideal, so I probably should have just put Saskia in the range row. Okay, then it's Vess. Lots of Northern Realms here. And I do really like using Vess to make Treason particularly effective, since I got rid of their Kirak Frigate. Then Drog, which they do not yet activate. And I think our best option here is to go spawn this in with the Kirak Frigate. Again, this melee row is going to get very crowded very quickly. Then go Zoltan, range row to boost all those guys. And Saskia will continue to summon more units from our deck. Okay, they'll use Yarpen for 3 damage. Is fortunately not quite enough to destroy our card. But it does mean that now this is very vulnerable to getting destroyed by this Kid-20 Revenant. Unless we just destroy it, which we could very well do. So I think we do that. We already have a dragon with Saskia, so it's not a huge deal to go with the other Saskia here, but maybe we go that route. I think it is that. Then they'll get some resilience with Zoltan. Now if we spawn in another volunteer, we'll be at 25 points in the melee row, which means if we go with Bloody Mistress, we have the Sabbath to convert her into Gurnakora. And then it's the Phoenix for some more carryover. Though notably, they have not caught us. So I think that means that we ought to pass here, because we are still a card up, and we'll continue to get more cards out from our deck with Saskia Commander. So they'll give us the round 1 win. And now let's swap out some of our higher provision cost cards. Regis is the highest, at 13. Let's get rid of him. And we aren't as concerned about getting any specific cards out from our deck because we've already played Saskia Commander. So let's get rid of Yorvit's Gambit as well. And we may consider playing here, because sure, they have 4 points of carryover from Zoltan and 4 points from this Phoenix as well, but we do have an extra card on them. So at the very least, it may be a good opportunity to try to bleed them out a little bit, especially because Ben Morlehem Cupbearer has Assimilate, which is really nice in this event. Then it's Roince. They have 10 cards in their deck, which means that's worth a decent amount of points, and they will get rid of our Cupbearer, unfortunately. However, She Who Knows is very nice, so I think we will definitely look to play her here. And it's Hemdall, and we have precisely 1 card on the board, so it's not a very big play other than the 8-point body. Speaking of big bodies, we have a few more of those here with both Goliath and the Ratcatcheress. Could even take a chance with Naglfar and see if we get Vernossiel, all of which are solid. think we go with Goliath here, which might be the most straightforward option, so I'd like to get to 25 points so we get Sabbath and get some carryover with either She Who Knows or now potentially might be Goliath. Then it's Masquerade Ball, so that means at least some of their cards have looped all the way up to 15 provisions. It's usually pretty tough to put to much use, unless you do have Tactical Decision for Nilfgaard, in which case they might be able to draw a card from their deck that is an aristocrat capable of triggering that Masquerade Ball. So that may be a risk, but we can also get some guaranteed resilience here. And that is just enough with Vandergrift to get us up to 25 in this row, so that means either She Who Knows will give resilience to herself, or Goliath, giving us tons of carryover. And it's another Phoenix, so they are getting a little bit more carryover themselves. And I think we ought to point slam here with Old Spear Tip. That's too good of an opportunity to pass up. Then She-Troll, it's going to be pretty hard for them to put her to much use. Remember, they do still have Roynt's ability, which they will use here. Now let's go Lacerate to force them to keep on playing. And now they need to use their lead ability. So will they find a way to trigger this Masquerade Ball? Get a little bit of poison. Get another unit on the board. No, it's Caretaker. Oh, which can purify our resilience. Okay. But we'll see what we get for our last card. It's Broover, who may not be enough by himself, but combined with our leader ability, should be sufficient. Let's get a few of these Elven Deadeyes out here. And that should do the trick. So there's a look at a Scoia'Tael deck for the new Patience is a Virtue seasonal event. Thank you all for liking and subscribing, and let me know if there's any specific cards, archetypes, or factions you'd like us to experiment with next. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.